It's time for another SAR podcast, where we're going to talk about survival, firearms, tactics, training, and more. Hey everybody, Steve here, Safe Arms, and today we're going to talk about prepping and survival. It's kind of interesting because people start out, they hear all the doom and gloom, they see what's going on with the government, they see what's going on with the economy and the recession and slash depression. We see just all the problems that are associated with the selling out of America. We've seen our country, which was the greatest country in the world, was the center, it was the hub of commerce and economy, and when the United States sneezed, the other countries, they just fell over backwards because we produce things, we produce quality products, goods, services. Our exports were through the roof, and somehow we lost our way when it came to our form of government and people and their freedoms and their rights. Somewhere along the way, every single one of us fell short when it came to overseeing and having that checks and balances in watching over those who govern us. In other words, our politicians, our senators, our governors, our elected officials, from the city level to state, even to the federal level. We forgot that we needed to look at the Constitution, and we needed to support the Constitution and make sure that those who were civil servants were protecting our rights and protecting our form of government and protecting our country and guarding against corruption and greed and those things and other countries that would try to make a dime off of us. So we're all to blame in one way or another. Unfortunately, where we're at today has got us to a point of where prepping and survival, that mentality has become more mainstream. Now, you can look at it at the extreme of, I'm going to move out into the mountains, I'm going to make a kill house, I'm going to do, you can go to the extreme one way or another. You can go so extreme as to say that you end up becoming a paramilitary organization, and then that's when Big Brother really looks at you and says, these guys are buying automatic weapons, there are tons of ammo, they're running drills and tons of stuff, which there's nothing wrong with that. But perception is how you are perceived can be a two-edged sword. Okay, so you need to be careful about what you're doing. But then there's the other extreme of not doing anything at all and thinking that the government is going to take care of you. We saw that in Katrina. We saw that in a lot of natural disasters in California, throughout the United States. Look at ice storms, look at floods in areas that were hit, and things, hurricanes, tornadoes, where the government has fallen short. It used to be a long time ago when emergencies occurred, local townspeople would help each other out. Churches would help each other out, the Kiwanis Club, everybody would pitch in to help out the community, but we don't have that these days. And unfortunately, because it's, again, fell onto people that there are no checks and balances, people don't want to take responsibility, there is no sense of community. So that has kind of driven this place of where we're at, where we have lost our way in regards to our rights and our freedoms. Our politicians have sold us out, and we're borrowing money hand over fist to be able to print more money. We've made concessions for overseas countries to allow them to bring goods and services into our country without saying, hey, you need to pay a huge tax. Let's make money. If you want to do business in my backyard, you need to pay the piper, and for the benefit of our country. And unfortunately, we see businesses, we see small business, medium and large size businesses that are closing and going into foreclosure because they're the rug is being pulled out from under them by overseas competitors that our politicians have allowed to come in. And that's not supposed to be the case, and now we're getting to the place of where instead of producing, we've become consumers, and the main product of the United States is debt, and that is just furthering this recession, this depression, this economic collapse this time of uncertainty. And since we can't rely on community because we've gotten away from that, we've gotten to the point of where we have, our cell phones, our iPods, and we're so plugged into texting and doing what we want to do as individuals that we've lost that community, that family, that organization, that touch of human camaraderie, so to speak. We've lost that. Now, for people that are in the shooting community, the survival, the preppers, those people have gotten a jump ahead of everybody else. With the Safe Arms logo, there's that 1% down at the bottom of the 1% down at the bottom right there. That 1% is the 1% of the people that will make that extra effort and take that responsibility and do the hard work that's necessary to protect themselves, their families, and the general public. Some of these people have banded together, the survivalists, the preppers, these people that at one time used to be thought of as being, man, they're out there, they're crazy. They're now, it's reaching into mainstream, which is a good thing. The thing is, when we're talking, unfortunately, we're being forced into this position of protection and security and prepping and looking at what's around us. And if something bad happens, the worst case scenario, am I prepared? Do I have the things that's needed? Do I have the food? Do I have the weapons and ammo for protection and security? Do I have the medicine? Do I have the medical supplies needed to overcome a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, whatever it is? And more importantly, am I taking the time to train myself and my family in first aid, in survival, in camping? Let's just call it camping. A long time ago, when I was growing up, camping used to be the thing to do. When I lived in New Mexico, my family wasn't really into camping, but I found solace in going up into the mountains for 2 and 3 days at a time, taking a rucksack as a teenager by myself, going on BLM land, and just hiking the mountains and setting up camp and camping and hiking and doing all that stuff. We've gotten away from that, and where our camping experiences and survival and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and learning those fieldcraft tasks have been replaced with Xbox, Twitter, and texting. It's all about Gucci, it's all about Prada, it's all about doing all this instead of doing this and thinking and evaluating. Unfortunately, our society and our children have become socially, economically, and physically obese. We are out of shape as a country and as a whole. When we have our children experience, it's one thing for adults to have diabetes and to have heart problems and all this stuff due to obesity, because back when I was growing up, you didn't see too many overweight people like that, and you never saw kids that were overweight and obese at the rates that we have today and have type 1 and type 2 diabetes, that they walk 50 feet and they're winded. Man, when I was growing up, you could not keep me inside the house. The whole deal was, parents would say, see that street light, when that comes on, that's when you're supposed to come home. And that was it. It was from like 7 in the morning, boom, till 9 o'clock at night during the summer. You were out, you were doing things, you're running, you're playing, you're bicycling, you're having dirt clod wars, BB gun fights, the whole 9 yards, blowing off firecrackers. You were doing those things, and you were playing with stuff. You were camping. Even if it was just for a day, you'd set up a camp and a fort and the whole 9 yards, and you'd get your little can of Spam, and you'd have your little sterno thing if you're lucky to have that, or you'd build a little fire and you'd heat that up, make Spam sandwiches. And then you started to realize as a child, even at that age, that, hey, if I'm going to go camping or if I'm going to play Army, these are the things that I'm going to need. Now, compare that to the children that we have today, and you'll see that separation on how unprepared our society is when it comes to an emergency. I've been through a lot of natural disasters. I've been through some massive floods overseas where they had to evacuate, and water levels were 7 to 10 feet on the walls. I mean, when water gets that high, you have to evacuate. I've been through that. My family and I have been through that. We've had bug out bags even before they were called bug out bags. And the importance of those things is just you don't know how important that bag is until you go through that and you see the other people that have nothing. I've been through, of course, floods here locally. I've been through ice storms. When I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, there's probably some people there that have been through some ice storms, that there was 1 inch of ice on everything, and power was lost for a week, week and a half. So no heat, no power, middle of winter, power lines down, can't drive anywhere because people were stupid when it came to driving in winter. How much food did you have in your house? I ended up having people over that were assigned to be, because I was in the military, the guys who worked for me, had them come to my house. We ended up getting a kerosene stove from the shop, and that is what provided us heat. And it was amazing because it showed it was, I mean, I was trained, I could shoot on a dime, I knew survival and first aid tasks and all the stuff that the Army does in the infantry. But when it came to a natural disaster, that opened my eyes to say, hey, I am deficient in certain areas. And that's something that we need to consider nowadays. If you're just starting out looking at this thing called prepping and survivalism or whatever it is, you just want to prepare. It's like an insurance policy. You want to prepare for emergencies that are either natural or man-made disasters, so you and your family can survive and make that transition period until everything is right again. That's basically all it is. And some of the things that you're going to need it comes down, there are certain areas that you need to look at. And this isn't an all-inclusive list, but these are just a highlight of some things that you need to consider if you're talking about preparing and survival and looking at what can happen where you live, because it's not going to be the same. Where I live and where you live could be two totally different situations. You know, for people who live in 29 Palms, their biggest thing is probably going to be water and heat, and you know, how am I going to stay cool, and the things associated with that extreme climate, versus where I'm at here in the Rocky Mountains, where a natural disaster is most likely going to be snow and ice and the whole 9 yards, and how do you stay warm? But again, the same things, we can still look at all these different areas and say, well, do I need this, this, and this? And pretty much each and every one of these things are something that we need to look at. The first thing that we need to look at is protection. Because as we look at every single natural and man-made disaster, whether it's riots, wars, turned over tanker trucks of dangerous chemicals, or it's, you know, the riots, economic oppression and recession, depression, we see that when those things happen, crime goes through the roof. And so the first thing is that you need to protect yourself. You can have all the supplies in the world, but if you don't have a way to protect yourself and those supplies, it's going to be bad, and it's not going to be good. Protection can be everything from a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun. For those people that are starting off, I would highly recommend that the very first self-defense firearm for you in your home would be a shotgun. Remington 870 pump shotgun 12 gauge, great firearm. You also have Mossberg, another great company. Those are the two companies that I would recommend. And you don't have to buy these things brand new. You can go to pawn shops, you can go to gun stores. You don't have to get tons of stuff with bells and whistles and tactical this and that like I did to mine. You can just go get a $350 870 shotgun with a long barrel, and that's a start. You also have to consider and say, well, just because Steve says that he's got an 870 12 gauge, that means I have to. No, it doesn't mean that. What I'm saying is, get something to protect you and yours. And if you're not a big person like me, you might want to go with a 20 gauge. And it doesn't have to be a Remington, it doesn't have to be Mossberg, but those are the two that I would give the SAR thumbs up on. You might want to go with a 20 gauge. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that my wife is, she's like 5'4" and weighs like $120, and so for that 12 gauge, that 870, she can shoot it, but I mean that's a lot for her to handle. So we're looking at getting in the pump action. That's not something that she's really, she needs more training on. Of course, anybody needs training on that. If you've never experienced that, go to a good shotgun course, and I'm going to be going over that and some really good training that you can go through when it comes to shotguns, but that'll be on another video. Talking about shotguns, you might, for somebody like my wife and my daughter, you might want to go for something that's semi-automatic. So that way you can load that puppy up, and then you pull the trigger, it cycles around and loads another one up, and all you have to do is pull the trigger again. Yes, it has more moving parts, and the thing is, the more moving parts, the more apt it is to break. But again, with technology and the way firearms are made today, if you get a good quality firearm, you're not going to have to worry about it breaking down or anything like that. Okay, that's what it comes down to. So the first firearm for security and protection would be a shotgun. The next thing that I would suggest would be a pistol, a firearm of some nature. Now there's all kinds of fanboy wars going on about companies, Glock, Springfield, Taurus, Smith & Wesson, F&P, whatever it is. You'll find 100 different opinions from 50 different people. Okay, as regards to what you should carry or what you should get. But what it comes down to is that you need to make an informed decision and make that decision for yourself. There's nothing worse than somebody telling you and saying, you need to buy this firearm because it's the best. And then they end up, well, it might be the best for them, but it might be where, the grip, I don't like the grip of this thing. Or it's got too much of recoil, or whatever it is, I don't like it, I'm not comfortable with it. What's going to end up? That person is not going to fire that weapon. They're not going to train with that weapon. It's like, for example, the 870 shotgun. This thing, I tricked this out, and this is nice. But the problem is that this is too much for my wife and daughter. And it's too much, the recoil's too hard, it's not comfortable for them. So all those things are going to end up, it's going to be a training distractor for them, and they're not going to train with this as they should. And there's nothing worse than trying to force something on somebody that they don't want to do because they're uncomfortable with it, they don't like it, it's too heavy, or whatever the case is. So that's what I'm talking about. When it comes to protection in firearms, you need to go for quality as much as you can afford. People say, well, just, I found this pistol and it's only $100 and blah, blah, blah. Remember, you get what you pay for. A lot of people ask me questions, what kind of firearm should I get? And my advice is either to do some extra side work, put some extra money aside, and get a quality firearm. Get something like Springfield, the XD or the XDM series, or a Glock or a Taurus, or something. I would stay away with the lower end firearms if you have that ability. Now, if you can't, there are some other things that you can do. Like for example, Glocks have come out with their Gen 4, and so their Gen 3 prices are like super, super low. There's also the Gen 2 Glocks. Same thing with Springfield. When they come out with new models, the older models go down in price. And, you can pick up some used firearms, some very nice used firearms. But there is that line of coming to a firearm and saying, well, this thing is really, really old. It still performs. But again, that's a personal decision that you have to make on your own. So when we're talking about protection in firearms, also, there's going to be the question about caliber. Again, it's going to come down. I am a real huge proponent of try before you buy. If you have the ability to borrow or go out and shoot with somebody, try different types of firearms, 45s, 9mm, 380, 357, 38, whatever the case is, even shotguns, 12 gauge, 20 gauge, 14 gauge. Carbines, 223 5.56, or the 7.62 in the bigger caliber carbines. Try before you buy, because once you hand your money over, you don't want to have that buyer's remorse. People spend more time planning out vacations and shopping for a car than they do tons of research, but they'll do very little research when it comes to firearms and the things that their life is going to depend on those items. I see so many people that purchase things, and it's like, you should have done a little bit of research. But again, it comes down to you need to make that decision. You need to be informed. You need to do the research. And hopefully you can find like-minded people. You can go to gun stores with people who explain. Go to a gun store, ask them questions, have them explain, tell them, I know absolutely nothing about this. Explain it to me like I'm 6 years old on why and what are the pros and cons of this firearm here, or that one there, or that one there. Don't buy anything. Your job is just to ask questions. Take a piece of paper, a pen, write this stuff down, come back, check it out, verify it. Trust is a huge thing. Trust but verify, okay? That's what I'm talking about. You got to trust and verify. Trust what they're saying, but then go back and check it out and see if what they're saying is true. And then again, if you have that opportunity to go and shoot different calibers, people say, well, if it ain't a 45 or higher, it ain't worth getting. Well, the problem is you get to the point of where there are some people who are smaller frames that they can't handle a 45. So that rule of thumb doesn't work. It's turned up on its end, and we need to be careful of that when it comes to protection and security in firearms, okay? There's a lot of things that come into play. For example, revolvers. Some people might say, well, semi-automatics, you got to be careful. You can't store rounds, in here indefinitely. You need to switch that out. That's true. The more moving parts, the more things that you need to do, and the more malfunctions that are possible. That's truth. The other thing with a revolver is that there's not as many moving parts, but there are still malfunctions that can be had. There's still safety concerns that you need to look at. When that cylinder in the front, if you place your hand, let's say there's a revolver where the cylinder's here, and if you place your hand above that cylinder, those gases are going to escape from the front of that cylinder, and it could eat up your hands pretty good. Those are some of the things that you need to consider with a firearm. The other thing with a revolver, let's say you cock it back and all you have to do is pull the trigger. Are you going to store that in a cocked configuration? The great thing about revolvers is that you can load them up and then set them in a drawer or put them on that magnetic strip thing, behind your headboard or whatever the case is, in a secret safe or whatever, and they're ready. All you have to do is pull it out and pull the trigger, and you're ready to go. Again, that might be a consideration. They're easy to use. As far as concealment, the hammer on a revolver, some are hammerless. That might be a consideration if you are looking to do concealed carry or have it in a purse storage compartment or a bag compartment. You don't want that hammer hanging up on clothing or items inside of a bag. So there's a lot of things that come into play when we talk about security and protection with firearms. We could do a whole nother video talking about safe usage, the legal considerations and the laws in your area. That is just a huge topic. So you see that there is much research that needs to be done when we talk about security and protection. When we talk about survival and prepping, the other thing that we need to look at are the Barney basics. Some of the Barney basics that we look at, the first thing is water. Water is very important because the majority of our body is made up and consists of water. I saw some statistics and percentages of how much of your brain, how much of your body, even your bones contain water. And it is vitally important to keep your body hydrated. The average person goes around in a dehydrated state. In other words, they're deficient of water. Now, when you're deficient, isn't it strange that a long time ago, people drank more water and there wasn't a lot of skin lotion? Now you might think, whoa, what is he talking about? The thing is that the more you're hydrated If you're hydrated properly to the point of where you're good to go, you will find out that your hands are not chapped and cracking and your lips aren't. I mean, it's Barney basic common sense. But the problem is that we've set aside common sense and set that over there, and we've picked up our phone, and we've gotten to texting and drinking Red Bull and coffee and sodas and everything else except water. And that shouldn't be the case. This is a change of lifestyle when you're talking about survival and protection and prepping. You have to change your lifestyle, and you will. Once you start doing more research and you start finding these things out, the last thing that you should be ready at all times, at least to a certain degree. I'm not saying everybody's going to walk around and be Superman and always ready, always vigilant, but you should carry yourself in a state that is more conducive to survival than being deficient. And that comes down to hydration and water. When we talk about water, how much water do you have saved up? Where's your emergency supply? Have you actually run through and tried to put into practice the stores that you have? In other words, the average rule of thumb is 1 gallon of water per person per day. Okay, and so people will get on and they'll say, well, okay, I've done this. I got my 55-gallon drums. I've got my gallon jugs. I got my 2-liter Coke bottles full of water, and treated them, and I'm good to go. Have you actually tried to survive for an entire week with 1 gallon of water per day for hygiene and hydration and cooking? Wow. Try that. Try that for a day. Try that for a weekend, for a long 3-day weekend. Try that and see what happens. And it will, because everybody thinks, well, I have this stuff, I'm good to go. When you actually put that into practice, you'll realize that you need more water than what you initially thought. So that rule of thumb is again turned up on its end, and you come into reality and you understand that I'm going to need a lot more if an emergency happens. The other thing that comes with water is that you need to rotate your supply or get into a habit of rotating your supply. This is something that I need to work on. I'm like Ronco. I like to set it and forget it, and I'm good to go. But the problem is that you need to pay more attention to it. You need to look into treatment of your water with chlorine or iodine or the long-term water solutions that are out there. You need to look at all those things and how to purify your water if you come upon a water source that is questionable or you don't know if it's clean or not. There's many different things that you can do, and that's something that you can research and learn and train and remember, and that keeps you smart, it keeps you quick, it keeps you fast, and it'll keep you alive. So we need to look at water. You also need to look at food, because that's the next thing that you need. You can survive 3 or 4 days without water. Food, you can go quite a long time, but if in a survival situation during an emergency, you're going to burn up more calories than you ever have before. If you just go to work and you watch some movies, do some text and play some games or whatever, you're generally going to take in only so many calories. But in an emergency situation, say there's no heat, there's no food, you have to bug out, you have to protect yourself. The stress of the uncertainty or the upsetting of that routine of which you normally do will cause your body to say, hey, it will go into that emergency state and say, hey, I need calories, I need energy because of the situation, and I'm not in my normal state, so I need this. Just by stress alone, your body's going to burn up more calories. The thing is that some people out there have gotten to a place or a state where they can probably survive quite a long time on just the internal stores that they have. But again, there's stress on that as well. You shouldn't be in that state to begin with. So when we talk about food, what type of food? Are we looking at MREs? Are we looking at, MREs can get pretty expensive, and their shelf life. You need to look at the shelf life of items. You can buy 10 cases of MREs, but it ends up, 5 years, 7 years down the road, if you haven't stored them right, they might start going bad. So in other words, you need to rotate your stock. Food, freeze-dried food. If you have freeze-dried foods, the great thing is that they'll last 25 to 30 years. I've got Mountain House, I've got a bunch of supplies from Emergency Essentials, and the stuff will last 25, 30 years or more if it's stored in the optimal conditions, cool, dry place, and that's what I'm doing. So that stuff is like an insurance policy. But the thing is, what do I need to prepare myself or to prepare those meals? Got to have water. So again, now you have to go back and you have to reassess everything that you do. And do I need to increase my water? Do I have a garden? Do I have any seeds? That's the other thing. You can have a ton of food, a year's supply of food, but let's plan for the worst case scenario. Economic collapse, world without rule of law, SHTF, whatever you want to call it. What is your food stores designed for? What is the purpose? You have to define a purpose for every single thing that you do when it comes to survival and prepping. So when it comes down to food, you need to look and say, well, is this food going to just get me through an extended period of time, and then everything, society is going to come back to normal and I'm going to be good to go? Or do I need to get a little bit more in depth and say, well, there's going to be an emergency. There's going to be a transition period, so I have these emergency food stores. And then I also added to my food stores seeds and sprouts and all these things and gardening supplies. So that way, if the worst case scenario occurs, that I can plant and I can, it's going to be like going back to the 1800s. Go back to that farming type mentality and culture where you grow your own food. Do you have enough of those heritage seeds? Seeds that you're able to grow the plant, take the seeds and plant those seeds again. Monsanto and the big food companies and corporations that are actually making seeds that making big vegetables and fruits quick, fast, and in a hurry, but the seeds are useless. You can't replant them. And again, genetically modified seeds, that just kind of bothers me a little bit, because again, you're doing things to a natural food supply, whether by nature or God, put into place. Who are we to think that we can improve upon that? We get to the point of where, our food supply is made by corporations, and it's made by, by spraying chemicals on the ground and called fertilizing, with 4 or 5 different chemicals. But the problem is, we don't understand that to properly fertilize, you need 50, 60, 100 different nutrients and minerals and the whole 9 yards to go back into the soil. And that the soil needs to be rotated. You look back on societies of old, and that they would plant something here for a few years, and then they'd stop. They put real fertilizer on it, and then they'd use another piece of land and let this land here be replenished with all those things. And so they'd rotate their crops, and so that way the land was constantly producing very nutritious foods. So again, we're looking at, when you're prepping and survival, you need to look at food. You need to look at transitional food, is what I call it, to get you through that initial emergency. And that can be broken up into different parts. Let's say your bug out bag. You've got a little backpack that's got 3 days worth of food. Let's say you've got some stuff in your vehicle that's got maybe a week's worth of food. You've got in your home 6 to 8 months to 12 months worth of food. Let's say you've got some cachets, freeze dried or whatever the case is, or even seeds or sprouts in a different location for that long term. And what is it going to take? Are you going to need to prepare those meals? You're going to need lots of water to prepare that food. Are you going to need a heat source? Now, this is another thing that we're looking at. In a worst case scenario, there's not going to be electricity. There's not going to be the gas lines that bring gas to your house so that you can fire up your stove and cook food. So now we're looking at alternative energy sources, whether it's solar, wind power, generators, kerosene, gas, diesel, those different types of things that you will need to carry you through that transition period. however long that's going to be. If you're just starting out, I know this sounds overwhelming. Make sure that your family is informed and that all of you are on the same sheet of music. And you don't have to start off spending tens and thousands of dollars to be prepared. It can just go to the point of where with your food, hey, I buy usually a month I buy 4 cans of refried beans. Well, I'm going to buy an extra 4, and then just rotate that stock so that way if something comes up, you have that immediate food storage and those immediate storage supplies, and you don't have to touch your freeze-dried stuff or your MREs or whatever. Does that make sense? It should. You can start off slow. You can start off by going to the dollar store, by going and, you've been to flea markets. I've seen some flea markets where they end up having grocery store products there, cans, and the expiration dates are still way, way off in the future. Rotate the items, get a little bit more of the stuff that you actually use each and every day and every month, and just get a few more of those things. That should be the start of your emergency food supplies. And then later on, as time progresses, you can get a little bit of freeze-dried food. You can get more long-term supplies. You can get seeds and sprouts and all those things. And again, going back and revisiting that list that you have of saying, hey, I've got food, I've got water. Now it comes up to heat and energy. How do I prepare those things? Heat and energy. Do I need that just for my food, or do I also need that for me and my family to give a quality of life where I don't freeze to death at night? I spent over 20 years in the Army doing light infantry and all that kind of stuff, and I can tell you what, try spending 30 days sleeping on the ground in a sleeping bag. It gets old. Or sleeping even just with a poncho liner if you're doing missions, for a week at a time. It gets old. It's hard. It sucks in the worst way that you can imagine. Cold food, no hot coffee. Life can get pretty sucky, and that's where you have to dig deep inside. And more than anybody else, you've got to be that 1%er that will go that extra distance and reach down inside and say, hey, I'm going to continue on with the mission. For civilians or people who are not law enforcement, not military, and don't have that experience, you need to realize, try this. Try going out camping with just some clothes on your back and a poncho liner, maybe a tarp, and see how well you do during adverse conditions. When it's raining, when it's cold, whether it's this or that. Have your vehicle close by, because when it gets really bad, you can suck up and say, yeah, this sucks, I'm out of here. But that will bring about the reality of the situation of what can happen in a worst case scenario. The good thing is when you do things like that, that will get this thing between your ears moving and grinding and thinking and evaluating and saying, hey, this sucked. How am I going to answer and fix this problem? By doing this, this, and this. And that's how you can start building your bug out bag. That's how you can start building your supplies and realizing and saying, hey, what I was doing, what I thought was right was wrong. And here's how I can fix it. Again, you talk about alternative energy, solar, wind power generators, kerosene heaters, the risks and dangers associated with each and every one of those things. Like kerosene heaters, they give off carbon monoxide. When I was stationed in Korea, they heated their homes with basically a big charcoal briquette called the ondal. That's what they called it. And you would take this big, huge charcoal brick. It would be underneath the house. You light it, and it would heat the floor. And it had a radiant floor heat, which is awesome. The problem is that sometimes there's leaks, and carbon monoxide gets into the house, and then GIs would live over there, and it's kind of cold, so I'm going to close all the windows and trap all the heat in, where the carbon monoxide comes in, and families would end up dead. There was many families that when I was stationed over in Korea in the 80s and 90s, I was overseas for 12 years. You see it once is too much. So you need to become knowledgeable on the systems that you have in your emergency supply stores, whether it's food, water, equipment, heat, energy, firearms, the whole 9 yards. You need to know the pros and cons of each. Now when we're talking about those things, that's huge, but you need to consider that. How to prepare your food, heat, water, maybe even if you live in a desert condition, desert area, you need to look at those things as well. Do I have an energy source that's going to help cool me during the heat of the day? Look at 29 Palms. That place gets disgustingly hot. And I've done training out in 29 Palms, and I've been in temperatures where it's been 120 degrees, and I'm in full battle rattle. And again, that comes in going back to water, food. What am I going to need? You're going to burn more calories. You're going to need more water. You might have to go on in an improvised work schedule. Do more things at night in the cool of the evening rather than trying to beat your body and beat it down during the heat of the day. So there's those things to consider as well. The other thing to look at in regards to prepping and survival is medicine and medical supplies. First, you have to look at you and your family or the people that are with you. What are their medical problems? What are their conditions? Do they have to have certain medicines? Do they need insulin or painkillers or whatever? So you need to do an assessment of each and every person and then build your supplies for those needs, to answer those needs. A lot of times we see it here on YouTube and a lot of other places that people are so concerned about ammunition. They're so concerned about guns. They're so concerned about ammunition. And they're so concerned about ammunition. You know what? Try being in a situation where you hurt yourself or you have gotten hurt and you have no medical supplies and an infection can render you combat ineffective. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. And depending on the conditions that you're in, you want to have those medical supplies in your possession. You need to have those stores because you might not be able to go and get those things that you need. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people here on YouTube and in the survival and prepping communities. I wouldn't say there's a handful of them that will say, well, I'm just going to take my rifle and my ammo and I'm going to go get what I need for me and my family. The problem is you need to look at reality and make concessions that you might not be able to go and do that. Or somebody might have already had that idea before you and they beat you to the punch and now you're left holding the bag with nothing. Medical training, very, very important. If you haven't got any medical training, whether you're law enforcement or military, I was a combat lifesaver. I did advanced medical tasks. Get yourself an Army Soldiers Common Task Manual. Get the military manuals on first aid and survival. Get those things. For civilians, it's kind of hard for a lot of people. I myself, I can read something, I can understand, I can kind of pick it out, but I'm better at learning using all my senses. My eyes, my hearing, my senses, my hands-on, getting on and doing it. That's what I'm really good at. And then I'm able to share and show other people how to do that. It's kind of an Army thing, They tell you what they're going to show you, then they show you, then they're going to tell you, and you're going to get your hands on. And then so that way, it gets to the point of where you involve all the senses, and then you'll be able to teach somebody. I mean, there was times when I had to teach people how to do certain things over the radio. But because I did it and had my hands on, I could close my eyes and I could visualize each and every step on what to do on certain pieces of equipment or firing platforms, whatever it is. I could run through those things and transmit that over to another person that wasn't as well trained. And we're able to get the mission done. That even include first aid tasks. So medicine and medical supplies, you need to have those. Those are vitally important as well. And again, I would go above and beyond what you need and have extra. That's something also to take into consideration. Do you need extra food, ammo, water, medical supplies that would be used for an extended period of time, or you could also use them for a bartering situation? If somebody doesn't have medical supplies and they need insulin, you might be able to strike up a real good deal because they've got fuel, they got a ton of fuel, but they don't have the medical supplies. So you could work out a really good trade. Same thing with ammo or anything else. Need is going to dictate the price. And for those that have those things, you're going to be in a better position than somebody who does not. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Now, with all these things, going back to medicine and training, for civilians that haven't had law enforcement or military training in first aid, check out the American Red Cross. Check out free first aid classes. American Heart Association, which teaches you how to do CPR, teaches you just a bunch of skills. There are people out there that will give you that medical training for free. You just need to take the opportunity to research, look, and find those things, and take your family, get them certified in CPR, get them certified in first aid, so that they know what they can do, so that there'll be a leg up among everybody else. Because there's nothing worse than an accident happening and a bunch of people standing around scratching their heads because they don't know what to do, because they've spent too much time on Xbox and texting. When someone's life is at stake, somebody has to step up. And that somebody has to be you. It has to be me. It has to be those people that have, we understand that life is sacred. Not only ours and our families, but the other people around us. So take that responsibility, take that step, take that time, get away from that Xbox, get away from that texting, the twittering and the whole 9 yards and all that useless junk, and get back to the basics. I know this is a lot of information. There's a problem that I know people are going to run into because been there, done that. A certain family member will get into prepping and survivalism and guns and shooting and protection and the food, the water, the medicine, the whole 9 yards, the alternative energies. They will go into that full bore. It's like a charging bull. They see they're like a runner. They see the goal, boom, they're gone, and they're going for it. But they leave their other family members behind, and they're like, what the hell is my husband doing? Or what the hell is my wife or my brother, my cousin doing? I don't understand. To be a good prepper, to be a good survivalist, one who is prepared for emergencies, whether they're natural or man-made, you also need to be a teacher. You also need to be able to explain to your family members why this is important, and bring them into the reality and bring them along and keep them on the same page as you. Now, for some people, it would take a lot longer. People learn learn differently and not as quick as others. You also have to look at, well, why are we doing this? You have to explain, and just don't give a one-word example or a sentence and say, well, here's the explanation. Okay, come on, let's go. Hurry up. Let's spend a ton of money. Or let's do all these things. You need to the way you present this to a family member can have a huge impact on whether they follow and go into this with you or not. It's like we talked about the firearms. If you get a firearm into the hands of somebody where it's uncomfortable, they're uninformed, they don't have any knowledge about it, so it's kind of like a mystery and it's dangerous, they don't like the feel of it, and you try to force that upon them, they will not go out and shoot. The same thing applies with prepping. The same thing applies with survival. All of that applies. That if you don't take the time to be patient and explain in more than one way, because men are kind of stupid and we tend to say, okay, well, this is why, so here's the answer and let's do it. In regards to explaining to your wives or your girlfriends or whatever, or your fiancés, we need to explain it more. We need to put emotions. We need to empathize and say, hey, think about how this would make you feel if I got hurt and you weren't able to take care of me, or I wasn't able to take care of you. Explain that to your loved one and say, hey, if an emergency came up and we didn't have these supplies, I love you, babe, and this is why I want to get these supplies. And understand that, kind of give a big picture of saying, hey, this is my commitment to you, and this is why I want to do those things. It needs to be from the heart. That's what it comes down to. And you need to be able to explain it in a way that they'll understand. And unfortunately, men, being the stubborn animals that we are at times, we tend to forget that. It's great that men want to go out, run, hunt, kill, eat, and do all that. But we also need to understand that our better half, we need to bring them along as well. We need to bring our children along. We need to bring them, and not to be that doom and gloom, but just to bring about and say, hey, here's reality. Let's say something happens here at home where somebody gets severely hurt. We don't have a first aid kit in the house. Yeah, we call the ambulance, but what happens if something happens between the time that they leave and the time that they get here? What if it's really serious? In other words, we need to reincorporate common sense into our families and into our discussions. And the other thing is communication. Because so many of us, because we've gotten into this Twitter texting mindset that we're communicating, but it's really we're not communicating as individuals, as people did a long time ago, where you look a person in the eye and you say, hey, here's what I'm talking about. There's no amount of texting that you can do that can replace the eye contact and the interaction of communicating from your heart. Nothing. No 3D TV, no nothing, no texting, no Twittering, none emails. That doesn't cut it. It's not a replacement for standing in front of somebody and be able to teach, train, and explain why we're doing these things. And everything that we do should go back to reinforcing our commitment to our wives, our fiancés, our families, our children, brothers, sisters, whatever our families. It should always reinforce our commitment and our love to those people. Because when you do that from that perspective, they will understand, and they'll see it in your eyes, and they'll see it from your heart. Then they'll start to wake up more. But if we get to the point of where we end up just talking about, well, look at facts and figures and statistics, and that's why we need to do this because the government sucks and blah, 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 blah. We get into this ranting, raving, hysterical, way out in left field, man, that guy's crazy. My husband's a nut job. We don't want that. We want it to be from the heart. We want that to reinforce our commitment to our loved ones. And to be able to say, hey, this is just like an insurance policy. You have life insurance, you have car insurance, you have it, you hope you never have to use it. But if you do have to use it, it's good that you do have it. Because that's going to set you apart from the majority of the other people around that are not prepared. We look at the times of just natural disasters and snows and people, trying to walk to stores because they didn't have enough food in their house. We need to change our mentality. We need to change our belief systems. We need to change how we think and how we relate to the world in emergencies. And put ourselves into situations or scenarios where we can actually work through an emergency situation to see how we react, to see what we need and the problems that we face. And then we can fine-tune our food and our water and our protection, our medicine, and all those things. And you'll find that if you engage the entire family, it can become fun. And then, wouldn't you like to be that 1%er? The 1% of the population and the families that actually come together and have a good time together, and actually go out and do these things together, where you can look somebody in the eye and you can see their heart and know that what they're saying is true and real. And if we can take that step and do that for our families, then perhaps we can do that with other people. and we can bring about a community of like-minded individuals, and those individuals will replicate that same thing. And it may be some of those people who believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and have common sense and can think rationally. We can put some of those people, get rid of all those idiots up in our government and replace them with quality people, so they can prepare and plan and put our country back into a place of where it should be, instead of being debt-ridden, with their knee bent towards corruption and giving concessions to foreign countries, because that foreign country is going to take care of their own people. I think our politicians have forgotten that. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our family. We need to take care of our communities and our form of government, and not let other countries run roughshod over us. But it all starts at the individual level, where you and I need to step up and take responsibility. And then we need to teach and train our families, and then other people. We get into a community situation, which would be really nice, of like-minded individuals, to where you have other peoples that are trained in certain areas that you're not trained in, that can just better our situations for survival and prepping and just building a better quality of life. So anyway, that's the blog for today. I know it's a lot of stuff to go over, but I think it's important. I think for those of you who are starting out with prepping and survival, and this isn't all inclusive. This is just the starting point. There's so much more to go into. But anyway, that's it. So take care, God bless, and keep up the good work. Remember to strike fast, hit hard, put them down, and reload. Subscribe to Safe Arms Review on YouTube and Blip TV.